When my tire went flat at that little workshop lost on the BR 364, I never imagined I was about to find the greatest treasure of my life, my son, whom I had been searching for over 24 years. Before we continue, subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell because every day we have new stories. Leave your like and tell us in the comments which city you're watching from. My name is Roberto Silva dos Santos. I am 55 years old and I've been a truck driver for more than 3 decades. Today, I want to share with you the most incredible story of my life, the day God gave me the greatest gift I could ever receive. It was a Friday in March 2022, around 2 in the afternoon. I was driving my Scania truck along the BR 364 near Cuyaba, Mato Grosso, when something very strange happened to me. You know, after so many years on the road, we develop a kind of sixth sense for these things. But this was unlike anything I had ever experienced. My load was in order, the tires were new, the truck had just been serviced. I had no reason at all to stop. My route usually didn't even pass through that region. I had changed my path at the last moment with no logical explanation. It was as if an invisible force was guiding my steering wheel to that specific place. Suddenly, I felt an inexplicable compulsion. An inner voice, as clear as crystal water, told me, "Stop at that workshop up ahead." It wasn't my voice. It wasn't my thought. It was something coming from much higher, much deeper. I looked at the speedometer, the tires, the rearview mirror. Everything was perfect. Even so, my hand turned the wheel on its own. The sign read, Antonio's Workshop, General Services. It was a simple shop, one of those you find scattered along Brazilian highways. Nothing special, nothing that stood out. But my heart began beating out of rhythm when I parked in front. I stepped down from the cab and came up with some excuse about wanting to check the rear tires. The owner, a man of about 60, dark-skinned with calloused hands of someone who's worked since boyhood, greeted me with a smile. "Good afternoon, trucker. How can I help?" That's when I saw him. A young man was squatting, working on an engine with his back to me. When he stood up and turned his face toward me, I felt as if the world had stopped spinning, as if time had gone back 24 years, as if God was whispering in my ear, "Here is the answer to your prayers." The young man was about 25 years old, dark-skinned like me, with strong hands used to heavy work. But what caught my attention, what made my heart nearly burst out of my chest, was a small crescent-shaped scar right on his forehead, exactly like the one I had seen every night in the faded photographs I carried in my wallet for more than 22 years. "Gabriel!" The word left my mouth before I could even think. The young man looked at me confused, wiping his hands on a grease-stained rag. "Sorry, sir, do I know you?" he asked in a voice that sent chills down my spine. It was deep, matured, but I recognized something there, something I had kept in my heart since 1998. I tried to compose myself, but my hands were shaking. 24 years of searching, 24 years of sleepless nights, 24 years praying on my knees on the cold truck floor, begging God to give me a sign to show me where my son was. No, sorry, young man. It's just that you reminded me of someone very special." I swallowed hard, trying to control the wave of emotion rising in my throat like a giant tide. "What's your name again?" "Gabriel," he answered, and it was as if a lightning had struck my chest. "Gabriel Moreira. I've worked here with Mr. Antonio since I was 14. Gabriel Moreira. He was no longer Gabriel Silva dos Santos, as written on the birth certificate I kept in my wallet, along with the photo of a smiling baby with a tiny scar on his forehead. The workshop owner came closer, noticing my agitation. "Everything okay, trucker? You look a little pale." I just need to check something on the tire," I stammered, walking to the back of the truck to try to pull myself together. But my mind was in total confusion. Could it be, after so many years, so many cities, so many broken hopes, could it be that God had finally answered my prayers? I leaned against the trailer and closed my eyes. "Heavenly Father," I murmured softly, "if this really is my Gabrielle, give me the strength to know how to act.
I searched for him so long, I never stopped believing you would bless me with this moment. When I opened my eyes, Gabriel was standing beside me, a worried expression on his face. Are you sure you're okay, sir? Do you want a glass of water? At that moment, something unexplainable happened. Looking into his eyes, I recognized something instantly. It wasn't just the scar, it wasn't just his features, it was something deeper, more primal. It was the gaze of my son, the same sweet and curious look he had when he was just a baby in my arms. Gabriel, I began slowly, feeling that I was about to change both our lives forever. Can I ask you a somewhat strange question? He looked clearly intrigued. Do you know anything about your real parents? His expression changed completely. For a second, I saw a shadow of sadness pass through his eyes. Why do you want to know that? He asked, his voice lower now. It was now or never. God had brought me there for a reason. 24 years of searching, 24 years of unshakable faith. Everything had led to this exact moment in this small workshop in the middle of Mato Grosso. Because, I said, pulling my wallet out with trembling hands, I think I may have just found the greatest blessing of my life. You need to understand how it all began, to grasp the magnitude of what was happening in that workshop. Let me take you back to 1997, when I was only 31 and thought I had my whole life planned out. At that time, I lived in Campo Grande, Mato Grosso do Sul, in a simple little house full of love. I was married to Cristiane Oliveira, a beautiful woman with curly hair and a smile that lit up any room. We met at a church June festival in 1995, and it was love at first sight. She was only 23, worked as a nursing assistant at the municipal hospital, and dreamed of having a big family. I'd already been a truck driver for a few years. I had bought my first used truck with great sacrifice, an old Mercedes 1113, but it provided our livelihood. Back then, freight still paid well, and I managed to make a decent living, driving between Mato Grosso do Sul, São Paulo, and Paraná. In September 1997, our lives changed completely. Cristiane gave birth to Gabriel, and I can say without lying that I never felt such complete happiness as the moment I held that little baby in my arms for the first time. He was perfect, with bright little eyes and an impressive strength for someone so small. I remember as if it were yesterday the accident that marked Gabriel forever. He was only 8 months old, just starting to try standing up by holding on to furniture. I had just come back from a short trip to São Paulo and was playing with him in the living room when it happened. He slipped and hit his little forehead on the corner of the coffee table. It was pure desperation. Cristiane screamed so loud the neighbors came running. We rushed Gabriel to the hospital, and thank God it wasn't serious, just a small cut that needed 3 stitches. But it left that little crescent-shaped scar right in the middle of his forehead. The doctor said it would become almost unnoticeable over time, but it never completely disappeared. He'll be our boy's trademark, he said. I used to joke with Cristiane, kissing that little scar every night when we said goodnight to Gabriel. I never imagined that years later, that tiny mark would be the only thing that would let me recognize my own son. In those first months, I was the most doting father you can imagine. Whenever I was home between trips, I spent hours playing with Gabriel, teaching him little words, making faces to make him laugh. Cristiane always complained that I spoiled him too much, but how could I resist that angelic face? I had big plans for the future. I wanted to buy a new truck, maybe start a small transport company, give Gabriel a good education, maybe even college.
I dreamed of seeing him grow up, teaching him to drive, passing on to him everything I had learned in life. I saved every penny I could, cutting back even on basic things, always thinking about the future of my family. Gabriel was a smart and affectionate child. At just over 1 year old, he was already babbling Daddy and Mommy. He would spend hours watching the trucks that passed by the main street near our house, as if he already knew what his destiny would be. I used to joke that he had inherited the passion for the road and that one day he would be my work partner. Cristiane was an exemplary mother in those early times. She cared for Gabriel with all the love in the world. She sang lullabies, made him special meals, took him for walks in the square in the late afternoons. She had requested a transfer at the hospital to work only the morning shift so she could spend more time with our son. But now, looking back, I realized there were already signs that things were not completely well. My trips were getting longer, competition in freight was increasing, and I had to accept loads that took me farther away, keeping me away from home for entire weeks. Christiane began complaining about the loneliness. "Roberto, you spend more time on the road than here with us," she said, holding Gabriel in her arms, staring out the window. "The boy barely knows you. When you come back, he even feels strange around you the first day." Those words hurt me deeply, but I tried to explain that I was doing everything for them, for our future. "Love, it's just for now. Soon I'll be able to buy a better truck, get loads closer to home. Everything I do is for the two of you." In December 1997, I took a photo that I would keep with me forever. Gabriel was sitting on my lap in the truck cabin with that toothless smile pointing at the buttons on the dashboard. The scar on his forehead showed clearly, already well healed, giving him a unique and special look. Christiane took the picture with a disposable camera, and when it was developed, I had several copies made. "To take with me on the road and kill the longing," I explained to her, sticking one on the truck's dashboard and keeping others in my wallet. I never imagined that this would be one of the last photos I would take with my son as a complete family, that those images would become my only connection to Gabriel for the next 24 years, that I would look at that scar thousands of times, memorizing every detail, every feature of his face, waiting for the day when I could recognize him again. If I had known what was coming, if I could have foreseen the storm approaching our seemingly perfect family, I would have made different decisions. I would have spent less time on the road, paid more attention to the signs that Christiane was feeling abandoned. But life doesn't give us a second chance to get things right the first time. What I didn't know was that those were the last moments of peace in my life, that in a few months, everything would collapse like a house of cards, and I would embark on a 24-year journey trying to recover what I had lost. The year 1998 began with renewed hope. Gabriel was turning 1 year old, starting to take his first wobbly steps around the house, and I had landed a better contract with a company in Sao Paulo, which promised more regular loads and better pay. I remember perfectly January 15th, 1998, when I left for a trip that should have lasted only 5 days. Gabriel was at the gate of the house, clinging to the bars, waving his chubby little hand while I started the Mercedes engine. Christiane was beside him, but her smile looked forced, distant. "Take good care of Mommy for Daddy, okay, champ?" I shouted from the window, and Gabriel gave that sweet little laugh that always melted my heart. It was the last time I heard his baby voice. During that trip, something strange happened. Normally, Christiane would call me every day at the payphone at my stops, wanting to know how the road was, if I was eating properly. But this time, days went by with no call. When I tried calling home, no one answered. On the third day, I managed to talk to our neighbor, Mrs. Marta, a woman of about 70 who always watched over Gabriel when Christiane needed to go out. "Roberto, my son, I haven't seen Christiane or Gabriel for 2 days. The house is always closed, the lights off." I thought it was strange, but assumed maybe she had gone to visit her family. A chill went down my spine. Christiane's family lived in Dorados, about 2 hours by car, but she always told me when she went to visit them. I tried to calm myself, thinking it was just a surprise visit, some family emergency she hadn't managed to tell me about. When I got home on January 20th, I found the door locked and an eerie silence. I used my key and went in, shouting, "Christiane, Gabriel, Daddy's home!" But only the echo of my own voice answered me. The house was a mess, not the normal mess of a family living day to day, but as if someone had left in a hurry. Clothes scattered in the bedroom, drawers open, some of Gabriel's things missing, especially his smaller clothes and a few favorite toys. That's when I found the letter. It was on top of the dresser in our bedroom, written in Christiane's shaky handwriting. Even today, 24 years later, I can recite every word of that letter from memory. Roberto, by the time you read this, Gabriel and I will already be gone. I can't stand this life of loneliness anymore. You love the road more than you love your family. Gabriel barely knows you. He cries every time you leave for a trip. I need to start over to give him a real home with a present father. Don't try to find us. It's better this way. Christiane. My first reaction was total disbelief. I reread the letter about 10 times, as if the words might magically change. Then came the anger, a fury I had never felt before. How could she do this to me? How could she take my son without even talking to me, without trying to find a solution? I ran to Mrs. Marta's house. Did you see them leave? Did you see if she was with someone? Did they take a bus, a taxi, a car? The elderly woman shook her head worried. My son, all I know is that Monday night I heard car noises, voices, but I didn't interfere. I thought it was visitors. On Tuesday morning, when I went to bring a sweetbread I had baked for Gabriel, no one was there. I immediately called Christiane's family in Dorados. Her mother, Mrs. Socorro, was shocked by the news. Roberto, she didn't come here. We haven't heard from her in over a month. We thought everything was fine because you weren't calling either. That's when despair truly took over me. If she wasn't with her family, where could she be? Where had she taken my Gabriel? In the following days, I did what any desperate father would do. I filed a police report. I hired a private detective with the little savings I had. I visited every bus station in Campos Grande and nearby towns, showing the photo of Christiane and Gabriel to employees, passengers, anyone who might have seen them. The police officer who received me was blunt. Mr. Roberto, unfortunately, cases like this are common. The mother has the right to leave with the child. It's not considered kidnapping. Unless there is evidence that she is putting the child at risk, we can't do much more than record the disappearance. The private detective, a thin, experienced man named Nelson, worked on the case for 2 months. He discovered that Christiane had withdrawn all the money from our joint account, nearly 3,000 reais we had saved to buy a used car. He also discovered that she had been seen at the bus station with Gabriel on January 19th, but no one knew where they had boarded. Mr. Roberto, Nelson told me in our last meeting, I'll be honest with you, your wife planned this escape. She covered her tracks very well. She could be anywhere in the country. I'll keep trying, but you need to be prepared for the possibility that this could take a very long time. A very long time. That phrase echoed in my head as I tried to keep my sanity and keep working, because life doesn't stop for our personal tragedies. I had a truck to pay for, bills to settle, and now on top of that, the expenses of searching for Gabriel. But the worst part wasn't the expenses or the sleepless nights. The worst part was looking at that photo on the truck dashboard, Gabriel in my lap, smiling with that tiny scar on his forehead, and asking myself if he was hungry, if he was cold, if he wondered where his daddy was. Did Christiane tell him bedtime stories? Did she remember that he loved pasta with tomato sauce and hated carrots? Did Gabriel miss me? Or had he completely forgotten me? Those questions tortured me day and night, turning every kilometer driven into a desperate prayer that I might find them. The next 2 years were the darkest of my existence. Between 1998 and 2000, I became a ghostly version of the man I once was. Every city I visited for work also became a search opportunity. Every gas station, every roadside diner, every school or daycare I passed turned into a place of investigation. I developed an obsessive routine that I followed religiously. I would arrive in a new city, unload the cargo, and immediately begin my pilgrimage, always with that photo in my hand, Gabriel on my lap, with that distinctive scar clearly visible on his forehead. I showed it to gas attendants, waitresses, pharmacists, teachers, anyone who crossed my path.
Please, have you seen this child? His name is Gabriel. He has a small scar on his forehead. He might be with a woman with curly hair, around 25 years old. Always the same question, always the same hope flaring up and then burning out in my chest. In March 1999, I received a phone call that nearly stopped my heart. It was from a police officer in Corumbá, on the Bolivian border. "Mr. Roberto, we have information about a woman and a child who matched the description you provided. Can you come here?" I dropped everything in the middle of a delivery in Curitiba and drove 12 hours straight to Corumbá. My head was boiling with expectations. "Could it finally be you?" I murmured to the photo taped on the dashboard. "Daddy is coming, Gabriel. Daddy never stopped looking for you." When I arrived at the station, the officer took me to a room where there was a woman with curly hair and a child of about 2 years old.
For a fraction of a second, my heart leaped. But when the woman turned around, I saw it wasn't Christiane. And when I looked at the child, although he was about the same age as Gabriel, there was no scar on his forehead and his features were completely different. "Sorry for the wasted trip, Mr. Roberto," the officer said, seeing my disappointment. "But we couldn't let the opportunity pass. The description really matched." I went back home destroyed, but something inside me had changed after that false hope. The disappointment was so deep that I understood I needed to be more systematic, more intelligent in my search. That's when I made a decision that would completely change my life for the next few years. I sold my house in Campo Grande, that little house full of memories, where Gabriel took his first steps, where I heard him playing in the yard. With the money from the sale, I bought a better truck and decided that my new home would be the road. If Christiane and Gabriel were somewhere in Brazil, I would find them by driving across the entire country. I started accepting deliveries to the most diverse destinations, always prioritizing routes that took me to regions where I hadn't searched yet: south, southeast, center-west. My map of Brazil started filling with red pins, marking each city where I had shown Gabriel's photo. In August 1999, some information led me to Curitiba. A nurse from the university hospital had called, saying she remembered attending a woman with Christiane's characteristics accompanied by a small child. She seemed nervous. She said she was going through financial difficulties. The child had some kind of mark on his forehead, but she couldn't confirm whether it was a scar or a recent wound. I spent an entire week in Curitiba visiting all the neighborhoods, all the daycare centers, all the health clinics. I slept in the truck, parked in a different square each night, always hoping that the next day I'd be luckier. But again, nothing. The winter of 1999 was particularly cruel. I was making a delivery in Porto Alegre when the longing hit me with full force. It was Gabriel's second birthday, September 15th. I stopped the truck at a gas station on BR-16 and cried like a child. There I was, alone on the road, while my son was having a birthday somewhere unknown, maybe not even remembering who I was anymore. That night I called my mother in Campo Grande. "Mom, I can't take it anymore. It's been almost 2 years of searching, and I haven't found even a shadow of them. Sometimes I think I died and I'm in hell, condemned to search for my son for eternity." "Roberto, my son," she said, with that sweet voice that always calmed me, "you cannot give up. Gabriel needs his father. Wherever he is, he has to know that you never stopped looking for him. Stay strong, and God will give you a sign at the right time." Those words from my mother gave me the strength to continue. At the beginning of 2000, I received a lead that would change everything. Detective Nelson called me with information he had obtained through contacts in the Federal Revenue Service. "Roberto, I discovered movements in Christiane's bank account. She made withdrawals at Banco de Brazil branches in Rondonópolis and later in Cuiabá, both in Mato Grosso. The withdrawals were made in January and March of 2000. This means she's still alive and probably in the region. My heart raced. Mato Grosso was a huge state, but at least now I had a concrete direction. I canceled all the deliveries I had scheduled and left immediately for Cuiabá. Once there, I set up a base of operations in a cheap hotel near the center city. During the day, I visited bank branches, showing the photo, asking in pharmacies, supermarkets, schools. At night, I drove around the outskirts, where people with fewer resources usually lived. It was during one of those night searches that I discovered something that chilled my blood. In a casual conversation with a security guard at a police post, he mentioned, "Oh yes, I've seen many young women with very small children asking for help here. Some are involved with drugs, you know. They lose their custody of their children to the Child Protection Council." Child Protection Council? That possibility had never crossed my mind. What if Christiane had gotten involved with drugs? What if Gabrielle had been taken away from her by the authorities? The next day, I went straight to the Child Protection Council in Cuiabá. The social worker who attended me was very kind, but the news I received completely destroyed me. "Mr. Roberto, we really did have a case in March 2000. A child of approximately 3 years old was taken from the custody of a drug-using woman. The situation posed extreme risk to the child: lack of proper food, unsanitary environment, exposure to dangerous situations." My world collapsed at that moment. "And where is this child now?" I asked, my voice trembling. "He was sent to a temporary shelter, but later adopted by a family. For legal reasons, I cannot provide you with specific details without a court order." Adopted. My Gabriel had been adopted by strangers because I couldn't find him in time. While I was driving across all of Brazil searching for him, he was growing up in another family, maybe even calling another man Dad. That was the darkest night of my life. Sitting in the truck's cabin looking at the stars, I felt that God had completely abandoned me. After the devastating discovery at the council in Cuiabá, I fell into a spiral of depression that almost cost me my life. The first months of April 2001 were a blur of pain, alcohol, and despair. I stopped eating properly, stopped caring about my appearance, and worst of all, I almost stopped driving. My truck stayed parked for weeks in a yard in Variza Grande while I drowned in drinking that seemed endless. I woke up every day with the same question hammering in my head. How can a father fail so badly? It was as if I had failed in the only really important job of my life, protecting my son. But it was precisely at rock bottom that something began to change inside me. One April morning, I woke up in the driver's seat of the truck with a terrible hangover and one absolute certainty. Gabriel was alive somewhere, and even if he had another family now, I was still his biological father. That no one could change. "If I die here in this drunkenness," I told myself, looking at the faded photo on the dashboard, "Gabriel will never know that he had a father who loved him unconditionally, who never gave up on him." That was the moment I made the most important decision in years. Stop drinking and restart the search, but this time with a completely different approach. Instead of desperation, I decided to embrace faith. I began talking to God every day, not asking for instant miracles, but for strength to continue and wisdom to know where to search. "Lord," I said every night before sleeping, "I know Gabriel is under your care. If it is your will for me to find him, show me the way. If not, give me peace to accept it." That shift in mindset completely transformed my journey. Instead of desperately searching in every city, I began to follow a deeper intuition. I started accepting deliveries that took me to specific places, always with the feeling that I was being guided by something greater than myself. Over all those years, I developed a very special relationship with other truck drivers I met on the roads. I told my story to hundreds of them, and many became my eyes and ears spread across the whole of Brazil. Roberto, old Joaquim, a veteran truck driver from Goiânia, once told me, Your story touched my heart. Every time I stop at a station, at a workshop, I keep an eye out for young boys with that scar on the forehead you described. That informal network of truckers became my greatest strength in the search for Gabriel. We were like a family spread across the Brazilian highways, all united by the same purpose, to reunite a father with his lost son. In 2005, 7 years after the disappearance, something interesting began to happen. I started having very vivid dreams of Gabriel. In the dreams, he was no longer that baby in the photo, but a grown boy, always working with his hands, tinkering with engines, fixing broken things. I woke up from those dreams with a strange feeling, as if they were divine messages showing me how my son was growing up. Maybe he inherited my knack for mechanics, I thought, remembering how, since I was little, I loved disassembling and reassembling electronic devices, fixing broken equipment. That intuition led me to start visiting mechanic shops in every city I went to, talking to the owners, asking if they knew of any young apprentice with a scar on his forehead. The years passed slowly, but my faith only grew.
In 2010, when Gabriel turned 13, although I could only imagine what he looked like, I began attending a small evangelical church in Campo Grande whenever I passed through there. Pastor Marcelo became an important spiritual counselor in my life. "Brother Roberto," he would tell me, "your perseverance is a testimony of God's faithfulness. He has a plan for your life and for Gabriel's life. Keep praying, keep searching, but place the outcome in the Lord's hands." Those words gave me the strength to go on. Every Monday morning, wherever I was, I would stop the truck and say a special prayer. "Heavenly Father, bless my son Gabriel, wherever he may be. Protect him, guide his steps, and if it is your will, allow our paths to cross again." Around 2015, 17 years after the separation, I began to notice subtle changes in the way I looked at the situation. The pain was still there, dormant, but I had developed a supernatural patience, an unshakable certainty that everything would happen in God's perfect timing. It was at that time that I met Vera, a retired social worker who volunteered in shelters in Brasilia. I told her my story during a lunch break, and she gave me advice that changed my perspective. "Roberto, have you ever thought that maybe Gabriel is looking for you too? When adopted children reach adulthood, many develop curiosity about their origins. That possibility had never crossed my mind. What if Gabriel, now an adult, was trying to discover who his biological father was? What if he too carried an emptiness in his heart, an unanswered question about his true roots?" From that moment on, besides continuing my active search, I began leaving traces so that Gabriel could find me. I registered my data on missing persons websites. I left information in notary offices in several cities. I created social media profiles with my story. If my son is looking for me, I thought, I need to make it easier for him to find me. It was a two-way street I had not considered before. The last years before the reunion were marked by growing serenity. I kept searching, I kept praying, but there was an inner peace telling me everything was moving toward the right moment. It was as if I were being spiritually prepared for something great that was about to come. In 2020, during the pandemic, when the roads were emptier and I had more time for reflection, I intensified my prayers. "Lord," I would say every night, 22 years have passed. If it is your will that I find Gabriel, allow it to happen while I still have the strength to be the father he deserves." It was as if my heart knew that the great moment was drawing near. In the weeks leading up to March 2022, I felt a strange sensation, a holy restlessness that made me change routes without logical explanation, accept freights to regions I normally didn't go.
Without knowing it, I was being guided by the invisible hands of divine providence toward a small repair shop on BR 364, where my son, now a grown man, was working unaware that his father had never stopped searching for him, not even for a single day in more than 2 decades. The year 2015 also brought revelations that broke my heart, but at the same time gave me a strange sense of relief. Through contacts I had made over the years, social workers, police officers, other truck drivers, I finally managed to trace what had happened to Christiani after our separation. The information came to me through a nurse named Patricia, who worked in a rehabilitation clinic in Rondonópolis. She had heard my story told by a trucker friend and decided to reach out to me. "Sir," she said in a phone call that would change my understanding of everything that had happened, "I believe I know the mother of your son." Patricia told me that Christiani had been hospitalized in the clinic for over 10 years, since 2003. Crack addiction had completely consumed her personality, turning her into an unrecognizable person. She arrived here in a deplorable state, she explained gently, malnourished, with various health problems, and completely lost mentally. In the early years, she constantly cried out for a child named Gabriel. My heart tightened when I heard that. Even in the depths of addiction, Christiani was still thinking about our son. "And now, how is she?" I asked, already fearing the answer. "Unfortunately, Mr. Roberto, she no longer has the cognitive capacity to live on her own. The prolonged use of drugs caused irreversible brain damage. She has moments of lucidity, but most of the time she doesn't even recognize herself. It's a very sad situation." That same week, I traveled to Rondonópolis to see her. Nothing could have prepared me for that encounter. The woman sitting in the wheelchair staring into the void barely resembled the vibrant Christiani I had once known. Her hair, once curly and shiny, was gray and lifeless. Her face, marked with suffering and drugs, looked as though it had aged 30 years. "Christiani," I called softly as I approached. She lifted her eyes, but there was no recognition there, only a lost look as if she were seeing through me. "It's me, Roberto. Do you remember Gabriel?" For a few seconds, something seemed to light up in her eyes. "Gabriel," she murmured. "My baby. Where is my baby?" Then, like a flame quickly extinguished, she returned to her absent state. The clinic psychologist, Dr. Marina, explained the full situation to me. According to the reports we have, Christiani hit rock bottom around the year 2000. She was living on the streets of Cuiabá with the child, in subhuman conditions. It was then that the Child Protection Council intervened and took Gabriel away from her custody. "And where did he go?" I asked, knowing this was the most important piece of information. "Initially, he went to a shelter in Cuiabá, but a family from Verza Grande showed interest in adopting him. They were hard-working people, owners of a small mechanic shop. The process was finalized in 2003 when the child was about 6 years old." My heart leapt when I heard that. A mechanic shop was exactly as I had so often dreamed. Gabriel growing up among tools and engines, developing manual skills. "Do you have the name of this family?" "For legal reasons, I can't provide specific information, but I can tell you they were exemplary people. We followed the case for a few years through social reports, and the child developed very well. He was raised with love and care." I left that clinic with mixed feelings. On one hand, I was devastated to see Christiani in that condition. The woman I had loved, the mother of my son, was practically dead while alive. On the other hand, I felt immense relief knowing that Gabriel had been saved from that terrible situation and raised by good people. On the way back, I stopped at a church in Rondonópolis and said a prayer of gratitude. "Lord, I don't understand your ways, but I see your mercy in Gabriel's life. Thank you for placing him in safe hands when I could not protect him." In the following years, I returned several times to visit Christiani. Not because I expected any recovery, the doctors had been clear about the irreversibility of her condition,
but because I felt it was my duty as a Christian. I would bring flowers, talk to her even without a response, tell her about my life, and about how I continued searching for Gabriel. During one of these visits, something extraordinary happened. I was telling Christiane about a dream I had had, in which I saw Gabriel working in a repair shop when she suddenly grabbed my hand with surprising strength. "Workshop," she said clearly, looking straight into my eyes. "BR, road. He is on the road." Then she returned to her absent state, but those words remained engraved in my memory. Nurse Patricia, who had witnessed the scene, was impressed. In 12 years working here, I've never seen her have such a clear moment of lucidity. It's as if something divine spoke through her. Those words gave me a new direction in my search. Road and workshop. Gabriel was working in a roadside repair shop. I began to focus my search specifically on workshops located along major highways, especially those between Cuiabá and Várzea Grande. Between 2016 and 2021, I intensified visits to roadside workshops. Whenever I made a delivery in the Mato Grosso region, I would dedicate extra time to stop at each establishment, talk to the owners, observe the employees. I always carried with me a photo of Gabriel as a baby and a computer-generated image of what he might look like in his 20s. "I'm looking for my son," I would explain to each workshop owner. "He was adopted as a child, should be around 25 years old now, and I believe he works in a repair shop. He has a small scar on his forehead, right in the middle." Some owners were touched by my story and promised to keep an eye out. Others gave me information about employees who partially matched the description, but every time I checked, it wasn't Gabriel. It was also during this period that I began having more frequent and detailed dreams. I clearly saw Gabriel as an adult man, always in a grease-stained jumpsuit, working under trucks, smiling as he fixed engines. In these dreams, the scar on his forehead was always very visible, like a sign that would allow me to recognize him instantly.
Pastor Marcelo, from the church I attended, always encouraged me to keep going. "Brother Roberto, these dreams are messages from God. He is preparing your heart for the reunion and showing you that Gabriel grew up well, that he became a hard-working and honest man." In December 2021, I made a special vow. I knelt at the church altar and prayed, "Lord, if it is your will that I find Gabriel in 2022, I promise to dedicate the rest of my life to testifying about your faithfulness. I promise to tell the whole world how the Lord never abandons a father searching for his son." 3 months later, in March 2022, that promise would be fulfilled in a way that exceeded all my expectations. The God who had cared for Gabriel all these years, who had placed him in a loving family to grow up far from drugs and destruction, was about to orchestrate the most miraculous encounter of my life. Christiane had lost her battle against drugs, but Gabriel had been saved. And I was about to discover that my son had grown up exactly as I had always dreamed, a hard-working, honest man, with the calloused hands of someone who knows the value of hard work in a roadside workshop, waiting for the day his biological father would pass by to change a tire that didn't even need changing.
While I was traveling along the roads of Brazil searching for Gabriel, my son, he was growing up on a small property on the outskirts of Várzea Grande, under the care of 2 people who would become his true parents at heart, Antonio Carlos Moreira and his wife, Rosângela Aparecida. Antonio was a simple man, 45 years old when he adopted Gabriel in 2003. He had worked his whole life as a mechanic, first as an employee in other people's workshops, then by setting up his own business on a small property he bought on the edge of the BR 364 highway. He was an upright man, a practicing evangelical who had always dreamed of having children but faced fertility problems together with Rosângela. Rosângela, in turn, was a woman with a golden heart. She worked as a seamstress at home, making clothes by request for neighbors, but her true gift was caring for people. When they learned about Gabriel's existence in the shelter through a social worker from the church they attended, they immediately felt that this traumatized child was the answer to their prayers.
Gabriel arrived at their home in May 2003, a boy of almost 6 years old, far too thin for his age, with that characteristic scar on his forehead and eyes that had seen things no child should ever witness. He hardly spoke at all in the first months, only watching everything around him with a mixture of fear and curiosity. He had terrible nightmares, Rosangela would tell me years later when we finally met. He would wake up screaming in the middle of the night, calling out for someone named Dad. It broke my heart to know that such a small child carried so much pain. Antonio, with the infinite patience of someone who works with broken machines, decided that the best way to win the boy's trust was through work. He began taking Gabriel to the workshop, teaching him simple things like organizing tools, cleaning parts, watching how engines functioned. From the very first day, Antonio used to say, he realized the boy had a gift for mechanics. It was as if he had been born understanding how things worked. Put a tool in his hand, and he already seemed to know how to use it. Gabriel blossomed in that environment of love and honest work. Little by little, he began to open up, to smile, to call Antonio father and Rosangela mother. The family had found its completeness, and the boy had found the stability he had never known in the first years of his life. When Gabriel turned 10 in 2007, he was already Antonio's right-hand man in the workshop. He knew how to change tires, do small electrical repairs, diagnose simple problems in engines. Truck drivers who stopped there were impressed with the boy's skill. "This kid is going places," said Mr. Mario, a veteran trucker who always stopped at Antonio's workshop. "I've never seen a child so naturally good with engines. It's like he has it in his blood." Those words were more prophetic than Mr. Mario could have imagined. Gabriel had inherited from me not only his physical appearance, but also his passion for engines, his ease in understanding how machines worked. It was my DNA manifesting through all the years of separation. In 2011, when Gabriel turned 14, he made a decision that surprised Antonio and Rosangela. "Father, Mother," he said one Sunday morning after church service, "I want to start working officially in the workshop. I don't just want to play mechanic anymore. I want to really learn." Antonio was worried at first. "Son, you need to study, to graduate. I don't want you to think being a mechanic is too little. It's an honorable job, but you can dream higher." But Gabriel was firm in his decision. "Father, I love working with my hands. I love fixing broken things, making engines run again. This isn't work for me, it's a calling." And so, at 14, Gabriel officially began his career as a mechanic. He woke up early, helped in the workshop during the day, and studied at night at the state school in Varzea Grande. He was a disciplined, respectful young man who treated all clients with courtesy and competence. The years passed quickly. Gabriel grew strong and healthy, his body shaped by hard work with calloused hands that knew how to bring dead engines back to life. By the age of 18, he was already known throughout the region as one of the best young mechanics in the state. "That boy has blessed hands," said Dona Concepcion, a longtime customer of the workshop. "I've never seen anyone so young with so much knowledge. It's as if God put a special gift in him." Those words were more prophetic than Mr. Mario could have imagined. Gabriel had inherited from me not only his physical appearance, but also his passion for engines, his ease in understanding how machines worked. It was my DNA manifesting through all the years of separation. In 2020, when Gabriel turned 23, he was already practically Antonio's informal partner at the workshop. He had become a responsible, hard-working man loved by the whole community. He attended church faithfully, helped neighbors in need, and had become an example for other young people in the region. "Gabriel is our greatest blessing," Antonio used to say to friends. "God gave us a son better than any we could have had ourselves. He turned our house into a true home." During the pandemic, when many workshops had to close, Gabriel suggested a strategic expansion. "Father, what if we set up a support station for truckers out front, with a tire shop, small repairs, a place for them to rest?" The idea was brilliant. The workshop thrived even during difficult times, and Gabriel became well known among the truckers traveling the BR-364. Always polite, always willing to help, always with that genuine smile that won everyone's sympathy.
At the beginning of 2022, Gabriel was 25 years old, a grown man, strong, with a neatly trimmed beard and that scar on his forehead that had become his trademark. Customers joked, "It's easy to recognize Gabriel's work. Just look for the guy with the little mark on his forehead." He didn't know it yet, but he was about to meet the most important client of his life. His biological father, who had been searching for him for 24 years, being guided by the hands of divine providence directly to that workshop, carrying with him a yellowed photo of a baby with the same scar Gabriel saw in the mirror every day. The traumatized boy that had arrived there at 6 had become a blessed man, raised with love by people God had placed in his path to save him from a tragic fate. And now, finally, the time was coming to discover where that natural talent for mechanics came from, those strange dreams with trucks, and that constant feeling that his story had a missing chapter waiting to be uncovered. The year 2022 began differently for me. There was a holy restlessness in my spirit, a constant feeling that something great was about to happen. It was as if, after so many years of praying and searching, heaven itself was moving to answer my pleas. In January and February passed in a strange routine. I found myself changing routes for no apparent reason, accepting freight that normally wouldn't interest me due to logistics or finances. It was as if an invisible force was redirecting my steps, preparing the ground for something I didn't yet understand. During those weeks, I intensified my prayers in a way I never had. Every dawn around 4 a.m., I would wake up with an irresistible compulsion to talk to God. I would park the truck in safe places and spend hours on my knees in the cab, interceding for Gabriel, asking for divine direction for my life. "Lord," I cried with tears in my eyes, 24 years have passed. My hair is gray. My strength is not what it was when I began this journey. If it is your will that I find my son, allow it to happen while I still have breath to be the father he deserves." There was also a subtle change in how I saw my mission. All these years, my search had been driven mainly by desperation, by the urgent need to fill the void left by Gabriel's absence. But now a supernatural peace began to take hold of my heart. In February, during a delivery in Brasilia, I visited the Basilica of Aparecida. I'm not Catholic, but I have always respected every form of sincere faith. There, before that image that represents hope for millions of Brazilians, I prayed a prayer that completely changed my perspective. "Lady Aparecida," I murmured humbly, "my son's mother was lost in drugs and could no longer care for him. If you truly are the mother of all Brazilians, intercede for me. Allow me to find Gabriel, not only to ease my pain, but so that he may know he always had a father who loved him." I left that basilica with an unexplainable certainty. The meeting would happen soon. It was no longer a desperate hope, but a serene conviction of someone who had placed the situation completely in God's hands. In the first days of March, I began to have extremely vivid and detailed dreams. I saw Gabriel clearly as an adult man, exactly as I imagined he would be. Tall like me, broad-shouldered, strong hands, working on engines, always with that small but visible scar on his forehead.
In the dreams, he was always in a roadside repair shop, serving truck drivers with politeness and skill. What caught my attention most in those dreams was a specific detail, a blue sign with white letters that said, "Antonio's Workshop, General Services." I always woke up with that image engraved in my memory, but I didn't know where that workshop was, nor who this Antonio was. On March 10th, 2022, something happened that definitively confirmed that God was preparing our reunion. I was making a delivery in Goiânia when my cell phone rang. It was Pastor Marcelo from the church in Campo Grande. "Brother Roberto," his voice was emotional, "I had a dream about you last night. I dreamed that you were driving on a road in Mato Grosso and stopped at a workshop to fix something on your truck. There, you met a young mechanic who was your son. The young man had a mark on his forehead, identical to the photos you always showed me." My heart raced. Pastor Marcelo had never had prophetic dreams before. He had always been a very earthly person, rational. "Pastor, do you remember any other detail?" "Yes, Roberto. The workshop was on a busy highway.
It had a blue sign, and the owner was an older man, dark-skinned, very kind. In the dream, when you recognized your son, both of you cried a lot, and there was a sense that God was present in that moment. I hung up the phone completely shaken. It was practically identical to the dreams I had been having. Two people in different cities dreaming the same thing. For me, that was divine confirmation that the moment had come. From that day on, I completely changed my work strategy. I canceled all the scheduled freights for the South and Southeast and began focusing exclusively on the Mato Grosso region. It was as if an inner voice guided me. It's here. It's in this region that you will find him. During the second week of March, something extraordinary happened with my work route. I received a freight proposal from Cuiabá to Porto Velho along the BR-364. It was a load of construction materials, nothing very profitable, but I accepted immediately. There was something about that highway that kept calling me insistently. On the eve of the trip, I spent the night in prayer. Heavenly Father, I cried out with all sincerity from my heart, if this is the trip where I will find Gabriel, prepare my heart for this moment. Give me wisdom to know how to approach the situation, how to reveal who I am without frightening him. That dawn, I had the clearest dream of all. I saw myself standing in front of the workshop with the blue sign, talking to Gabriel. In the dream, when I showed him the old photos, he became emotional and said, I always knew my father was looking for me. I woke up with tears in my eyes and an absolute certainty. That would be the day. On March 15, 2022, I left Cuiabá heading to Porto Velho. The sun was shining brightly, traffic was flowing well, and I felt an inexplicable joy in my chest. I sang evangelical hymns throughout the journey, thanking God in advance for the blessing I was about to receive. Around noon, when passing through the region of Várzea Grande, I began to feel a growing compulsion to stop somewhere. It wasn't hunger, it wasn't fatigue, it wasn't a physical need. It was something much deeper, a force that seemed to guide my steering wheel off the main road. I thought to myself, this is the moment. After 24 years of searching, the time had come for God to answer my prayers. Ahead I saw a sign that said, Antonio's Workshop, General Services. Exactly like in my dreams, exactly as Pastor Marcelo had described. My heart began to beat so hard I thought it would leap out of my chest. I parked the truck and got out trembling. It was as if my whole life had converged toward that moment. 24 years of searching, thousands of kilometers driven, hundreds of workshops visited, and finally I was standing in front of the place where my son worked. God, I murmured softly before walking toward the workshop, thank you for never giving up on me. Thank you for taking care of Gabriel all these years. Thank you for this miracle that is happening. It was the most important moment of my life, and I knew nothing would ever be the same after that afternoon. The father who had searched tirelessly was about to find the son who had been raised with love by people whom God had placed in his path. It was a miracle 24 years in the making, finally reaching its divine climax. I walked slowly toward the entrance of the workshop, each step echoing like the beat of my accelerated heart. The characteristic smell of lubricant and grease surrounded me, bringing back memories of my own youth when I too worked fixing engines before becoming a truck driver. The workshop was exactly as I had seen in my dreams, a wide shed with a cement floor stained by years of work, tools organized on benches, tires stacked in the corners, and the comforting noise of impact wrenches and compressors running. Antonio approached with a welcoming smile, wiping his hands on a dirty rag. He was a man of medium height, graying hair, with that trustworthy look of someone who had spent his entire life working honestly. "Good afternoon, trucker," he said with his cordial voice. "How can I help you?" "Good afternoon, Mr. Antonio," I answered, trying to control the trembling in my voice. "I feel that one of the rear tires is acting strange. Could you take a look?" He nodded promptly. "Of course. Gabriel," he shouted to the back of the workshop, "come here and help this gentleman with the truck tires." Gabriel. The name I had repeated millions of times in prayers. The name engraved in my heart for 24 years, echoed through the shed like a celestial chant. Then he appeared, crawling out from under a pickup truck where he had been working. He stood up slowly, and when he turned his face toward me, I felt as if a lightning bolt had struck through my chest. Was it him? Was it my Gabriel? Tall, just as I had imagined, about 1.80 meters, broad shoulders developed from physical labor, dark hair slightly messy, an unshaven beard that gave him a manly and mature appearance. But what gave me absolute certainty was that small crescent-shaped scar right in the middle of his forehead, exactly like the photo I had been carrying for more than a decade. "Are you okay, sir?" Gabriel asked, noticing my agitation. "You look a little pale." I'm fine, yes," I stammered, trying to compose myself. "It's just that you reminded me of someone very special." Gabriel smiled, that genuine smile that completely lit up his face. "Ah, that happens. They say everyone has a doppelganger out there, right?" We walked together to the back of my truck. He began examining the tires with professional skill, kneeling down, checking the pressure, looking for signs of wear. I observed every movement of his, every gesture, trying to recognize traits that could be my genetic inheritance. "Your tires are in great condition," he said, standing up and wiping his hands. "I didn't see any problem. Maybe it was just your impression or some irregularity on the road that made you feel a difference in the handling." That was my cue. I couldn't postpone the truth any longer. "Gabriel," I began slowly, "can I ask you a personal question?" His expression on his face changed immediately. A shadow of surprise crossed his eyes, followed by a natural caution. "Why do you want to know that, sir?" I pulled my wallet out of my pocket with trembling hands. "Because for 24 years I have been searching for a boy named Gabriel Silva dos Santos who disappeared when he was just over a year old. A boy who had a small scar on his forehead, exactly like yours."
Gabriel stood completely still, as if he had been struck by lightning. His eyes fixed on the wallet I was holding, then went back to my face, then to the scar I was pointing to on my own forehead, the exact same place where he had his. This can't be true," he murmured, his voice coming out hoarse. I opened the wallet and carefully took out the oldest photograph, the one I had taken in December 1997. The image was yellowed with time, but still perfectly clear. A smiling baby in my arms, inside the cab of a truck, with a small crescent-shaped scar right in the middle of his forehead. Gabriel took the photo with trembling hands and examined it closely. I saw the moment he recognized his own scar in the image, saw the exact instant when reality began to make sense to him. "This photo," he began, but his voice failed. "It was taken in December 1997, I completed. "You were just a few months old. Your mother, Christiane, took this picture inside my truck. You always liked playing with the buttons on the dashboard." Gabriel raised his eyes to me, and in that moment, I saw tears forming there. "Sir, you're my father?" "I am your father, Gabriel. I always have been. I never stopped looking for you, not a single day in 24 years. What happened next was one of the most emotional moments of my life. Gabriel let out a sob and threw himself into my arms, hugging me with desperate strength. I felt the body of my son, now a grown man, strong, hard-working, trembling against my chest. "I always knew," he cried in my ear. "I always felt someone was looking for me. I always had dreams of a man driving a truck trying to reach me." I too broke down in tears, hugging my son with all the strength I had. 24 years of pain, of searching, of sleepless nights, all dissolved in that embrace. "My son, my dear son, Daddy never gave up on you." Antonio, who had witnessed the whole scene, approached with tears in his eyes. "My God in heaven," he said, moved. "It's a miracle, a true miracle." Gabriel pulled back a little to look into my eyes. "Father," he said, and that word sounded like heavenly music in my ears. All these years, when I served truck drivers here at the shop, I always watched their faces, searching for something I couldn't explain.
Now I understand what it was. I showed him the other photos I carried in my wallet. Gabriel in Christiane's arms, Gabriel taking his first steps in the backyard, Gabriel playing with his first little toy cars. Each image brought fresh tears to his eyes. "And my mother?" he asked, wiping his face with the back of his hand. I took a deep breath. It was a question I knew would come, and I had prepared an honest but gentle answer. "Your mother, she was lost to drugs, Gabriel. She has been hospitalized in a clinic for many years, unable to live on her own. But she loved you very much. In her last moments of lucidity, she still spoke about you." Gabriel nodded, processing the information with maturity. "And you looked for me all this time, every day of my life?" "Yes," I answered firmly. "I traveled this entire country. I visited hundreds of cities, thousands of workshops. I showed your picture to anyone willing to listen to my story. I prayed so much, I think I tested God's patience." I joked, pulling a smile from him. "No, you didn't," Gabriel said, wiping away the last traces of tears. "On the contrary, God brought you here today. I felt all morning that something special was going to happen. I woke up different, with an expectation I couldn't explain." We stayed there talking for more than 2 hours. Gabriel told me about his life with Antonio and Rosangela, about how he had been raised with love and care, about his passion for mechanics, and about the strange dreams he had always had with trucks. I told him about my long search, about how I never remarried, about how every kilometer I drove was a prayer to find him. When the sun began to set, Gabriel looked at me with a serious expression. "Father," he said, "I need you to know something very important." "Go ahead, son." "All these years, I created an image in my head of what my biological father would be like. I imagined someone who had abandoned me because he didn't want the responsibility, or someone who had died in an accident. I never imagined there was someone desperately looking for me." He paused, looking at his calloused hands. "When you showed up last week and told me the truth, my world turned upside down. Suddenly my whole life story gained a chapter I didn't know about." "Gabriel," I began, but he raised his hand, asking to finish. "Let me say it all first, Father. These days have been very confusing for me. On one hand, I'm overjoyed to have found you, to know I always had a father who loved me. On the other hand, I'm trying to process 25 years of life, believing I was an orphan." He turned to face me directly. "You need to understand that Antonio and Rosangela are not just the people who raised me. They are my real parents, in the deepest sense of the word. They were there in every important moment of my life." I felt the tightness in my chest, but at the same time a complete understanding of what he was saying. "I understand perfectly, Gabriel, and I don't expect, nor do I want, to take their place. I know you understand," he continued, "but I need to make it clear that I want to build a relationship with you while respecting the family that welcomed me. I can't just erase 20 years of history." I took a deep breath and placed my hand on his shoulder. "Gabriel, you are being very wise and very fair. I didn't come here to disrupt your life. I came to complete it. Antonio and Rosangela did the hardest work. They transformed a traumatized boy into a good man. I only want the opportunity to get to know who you've become." His eyes filled with tears again. "Thank you for understanding, Dad, because I really want to have you in my life. I have so many questions about you, about our family, about where I came from." We spent the rest of the afternoon talking about everything. I told him about his paternal grandparents who had died before he was born, about uncles he didn't know, about the Silva dos Santos family of which he was part. He showed me his tools, taught me some mechanics techniques he had developed, and introduced me to the neighbors as my father who found me after 24 years. When the time came for me to leave, Gabriel made me a proposal that touched my heart deeply. "Dad, how about you come here every Friday? We could have lunch together, talk, and get to know each other little by little." "That would be the greatest gift of my life, son." "And one more thing," he said, taking something out of his pocket.
It was a small, golden key. "This is the key to my room here at home. I want you to have one in case you ever need to stay overnight or if you want to visit when you're passing by." I took that key with trembling hands. It was so much more than a piece of metal. It was the symbol that I had been accepted back into my son's life. On the way home, I stopped at a small church in Rondinopolis and spent an hour on my knees in gratitude. "Lord," I prayed, "thank you for having taken care of Gabriel when I couldn't. Thank you for putting Antonio and Rosangela in his path. Thank you for giving me such a wise and balanced son." The following weeks established a routine that became the most precious thing in my life. Every Friday, no matter where I was, I rearranged my schedule to be at Antonio's workshop. Gabriel and I developed a gradual, respectful intimacy built on sincere conversations and shared moments. He told me about his professional dreams. He wanted to expand the shop, maybe open branches in other cities. I shared my experience as a businessman. I offered him my contacts in the trucking business, but always making it clear that any decision would be his. "You know, Dad," he told me one of those afternoons, "sometimes I look at you and see where my passion for engines comes from. It's like it's really genetic." "It is genetic, son. Your grandfather was also a mechanic. You inherited it from the Silva dos Santos family." A month after our reunion, Gabriel asked me a question I had been waiting for. "Dad, would you like to meet my mom? Rosangela said she'd be happy to prepare a dinner to officially introduce you." "It would be an honor, Gabriel. They deserve my eternal gratitude." And so it was that, on an April evening in 2022, I sat at the table with the people who had raised my son in my absence. There was no embarrassment, no competition, only mutual gratitude and shared love for an extraordinary young man who had miraculously united our lives. "Roberto," Rosangela said that night, "Gabriel has been happier than ever since you showed up. You completed a part of him that was always missing." I looked at my son, strong, healthy, balanced, surrounded by people who loved him, and I knew that God had done everything right. I had lost 24 years of his childhood, but I had gained the opportunity to know the wonderful man he had become. 6 months passed since that transformative afternoon at Antonio's workshop. Today, as I write these words, I can say with absolute certainty that my life has been divided into 2 parts, before and after the reunion with Gabriel. And the second part has been infinitely more blessed than the first. Our Friday routine became the most sacred moment of my week. No matter where I was working, whether in Goiás, Mato Grosso do Sul, or even in more distant states, I always organized my schedule to be present at that weekly meeting. It is the most important commitment of my life, and Gabriel knows it. What impresses me most is how our relationship evolved naturally, without forcing anything, respecting each other's timing. In the first months, there was still some shyness on both sides. I didn't quite know how to act with an adult son I had lost throughout his childhood, and he was processing the presence of a biological father he had always imagined as an abstract figure. But little by little, we discovered surprising affinities. Gabriel inherited not only my physical appearance and mechanical ability, but also small gestures and habits I didn't even realize I had. Rosangela was the first to notice. "Roberto, you two scratch your heads the same way when you're thinking, the same way you tilt your bodies when examining an engine." A remarkable afternoon happened in June when Gabriel was struggling to diagnose a complex problem in an automatic transmission. He had been trying for hours to identify the defect, clearly frustrated. I approached and instinctively began examining the equipment. In just a few minutes, we identified together that the problem was a faulty speed sensor. "How did you know that so quickly, Dad?" he asked, amazed. "Experience, son, and also because you were looking in the right place. You just needed a second opinion."
At that moment, I felt I was finally living up to the title of father, not only emotionally, but also by sharing practical knowledge. It was then that I made a decision that would completely change my professional life. During a conversation with Gabriel about his plans to expand the workshop, I realized I could contribute much more than just occasional advice. "Gabriel, I have a proposal for you and your father Antonio," I said one Friday in July. "How about I become a minority partner in the shop? I can invest in the expansion, bring my network of trucker contacts, and gradually reduce my time on the road to spend more time here." His eyes lit up. "You'd do that? But what about your truck driving job, Dad?" "After 30 years on the road, it's time to slow down. And there is nothing in the world I want more than to work alongside my son." Antonio, who had been listening, approached with a wide smile. "Roberto, it would be an honor to have you as a partner. Gabriel always talks about your ideas to improve the business." And so, in August 2022, we made the partnership official. Antonio's workshop became Moreira and Silva Workshop, a name that united the two families who had come together through Gabriel. I invested my lifetime savings into the expansion. We bought modern equipment, expanded the physical space, and created a rest area specifically for truck drivers. The result exceeded all expectations. In the first months after expansion, our movement tripled. Truckers I had known for decades started rerouting to use our services, not only because of the technical quality, but also because of the moving story behind the business. "Roberto," said the old Joaquim, that veteran trucker from Guyana, who had always helped me in the search for Gabriel, "seeing you two working together is the most beautiful thing I've ever witnessed. It's proof that God has bigger plans than our understanding." But the deepest transformation in my life was not professional. It was spiritual. The reunion with Gabriel awakened in me such intense gratitude that I felt the need to express it in a concrete way. I began regularly attending the Assemblia de Deus in Várzea Grande, the same one Antonio and Rosangela had attended for decades. Pastor Ednaldo, a wise man in his 60s, welcomed me warmly when Gabriel introduced me as his father. "Brother Roberto," he said, "your story is a living testimony of the power of prayer and God's faithfulness. I would like you to share your testimony with our congregation." On the first Sunday of September, I climbed the pulpit of that simple church and told my story to more than 200 people. I spoke about the 24 years of searching, about how I never lost faith, about the miracle of the reunion. When I finished, there wasn't a dry eye in the church. Several people came to me afterwards to tell me their own stories of lost children, of separated families, of prayers still unanswered. "Your testimony gave me hope," said Dona Francesca, a 70-year-old lady. "It's been 15 years since I've heard from my grandson, but after hearing your story, I'll keep praying and believing."
That moment marked the beginning of a ministry I had never imagined. I began receiving invitations to speak in other churches, to tell my story on local radio, to participate in television programs, always with the same message: never stop praying, never lose faith. God has the right time for every blessing. Gabriel is very proud of this new phase of my life. "Dad," he told me recently, "seeing how you use our story to give people hope fills me with joy. It's as if all those years of suffering served a greater purpose." During Christmas of 2022, we lived a moment that will forever remain engraved in my memory. Rosangela had organized a special supper, inviting close relatives and friends. When the time came for the Thanksgiving prayer, Gabriel asked to speak. "Everyone," he said, emotional, "this year was the most special of my life. Not because I achieved material things or because the business grew. It was special because my family became complete. I have my father, Antonio and Rosangela, who saved me and raised me with love. And now I have my father, Roberto, who never gave up searching for me. He paused, controlling his emotions. I want to thank God for allowing three people who love each other to be united in this way. There is no competition among you. There is only multiplied love. At that moment, Antonio, Rosangela, and I looked at each other and knew that we had built something much greater than a simple family gathering. We had created a network of love that had withstood time, distance, and the most adverse circumstances. Today, looking back, I see God's hand in every detail of this journey. If Christiane hadn't fled with Gabriel, maybe he would have grown up in an unstable family, marked by her problems with drugs. If I had found Gabriel in the first years of searching, maybe I wouldn't have had the maturity to accept Antonio and Rosangela as part of the equation. God's timing was perfect. Gabriel grew up in a structured family, became a man of integrity, and when we reunited, we both had the emotional wisdom needed to build a healthy relationship. Now, at 56 years old, I can say that I am complete. I have a wonderful son, a thriving business, an extended family that welcomed me without reservation, and a life purpose that goes beyond my personal needs. I use my story to inspire others never to give up on their dreams, their prayers, their faith. Gabriel is dating a beautiful young woman named Fernanda, the daughter of a local farmer. We already joke about the possibility of me becoming a grandfather soon. When you have children, I joke with him, I'll make up for all the lost time by spoiling my grandchildren. This story has no ending because it continues to be written every day. Every Friday we spend together, every client we serve in the workshop, every testimony I share, every prayer of gratitude I say before sleeping. All of this is part of a miracle in motion. If you're hearing this story and you have someone you lost, someone you've prayed for years, someone who seems to have disappeared from your life forever, don't give up. God knows where that person is. He knows every detail of their situation, and He has a perfect plan for you to be reunited. My 24-year search ended in a small workshop off BR 364 with a hug that healed decades of pain. Your journey will also have a blessed ending, in God's perfect timing, in the place He chooses. As I always say now in my testimonies, a father's love never gives up. Persevering prayer is always heard, and God's miracles may take time, but they always arrive at the perfect moment.